Hey everybody, welcome to Maps Are Dead with Mike D. Conversations about how to navigate your life when the maps don't work, when nobody can tell you where to go and you got to decide how to navigate from the inside. I'm going to talk CliftonStrengths. Mariah Smith, really excited you're here with me.
I'm so happy to be talking to you and catching up, Mike. This is so fun.
This is going to be so fun. Mariah and I we're friends, but we're also Mariah, actually you worked at my very first Minnesota client way back in the day. So you're an editor at Capture Studios, right? But you're a full-time artist. You also do online business. You just have had baby number 3, how many days ago?
Oh my gosh, 6 weeks ago. So we are fresh.
6 weeks. So when it comes to navigating life, you're in it.
Yeah,
so,
I'm in life right now. Full-time, yeah.
I was like, I wrote down, and what's interesting too is you took strengths. I pulled up, your last report was 2018, and you took it again tonight. So I pulled up, I got your themes on the wall over here. So Futuristic, this is the new list. Futuristic, Activator, Ideation, Relator, Maximizer. Futuristic was number 1 both times. Ideation was 3 both times. But Activator was adaptability before. And Relator was 5. And instead of Relator at number 4, it was a Command.
Okay.
Command, which is super interesting. So we're going to talk through some of those changes and pieces. But Mariah, I kind of want to do a little story question because I was thinking about you before we got on the call.
Yeah.
And one thing that's fascinating to me is I feel like when it comes to navigating your life, this whole idea of making choices based on what you want and your own values, not someone else's plan, you've kind of done, I feel like you've always been just ahead of expectations and curve. Like you were an editor at a very young age. You and Perry, you and your husband Perry got married. You guys got married young. And I remember when people wow, they're so young, and they bought a house. And you were working as an editor, which you loved, with a company you loved. And I felt like you went through the Great Resignation 3 years before everybody else did. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
You kind of resigned early.
Yep.
Then you were I'm going to go into art. And you started a very successful online and doing art, but then also kind of how you provide and how you built your store and things. I kind of feel like you've been ahead of the curve. How would you say, have you always intrinsically known how to navigate these kind of moments?
You know, when I'm talking to friends and stuff, they always have said to me, it's so cool how you go and you do what you want to do and you don't really worry about what other people think about it or, how it's perceived. And I'm like, it's not that I intentionally try to do that. It's I almost feel like I get to these places in life where if I don't make the next step that I know I'm supposed to make, it's a suffocating feeling, or it's I'm going to break out in hives if I don't move forward with this next step that I know I need to do. It doesn't feel like this courageous thing to me. It feels more like if I don't do this, I'm dishonoring the voice that's inside of me or whatever. It's not necessarily something that I'm choosing to do. It's more so I'm just taking the next step that I feel.
It's almost like it grows out of what has to grow out of. It's a fruit that has to occur.
Yes.
Do you remember the first time you had to do you remember the first time of, well, actually, I don't like the assumption. Are you aware that not everybody navigates that way?
Yes. Yeah. Totally.
When did you first notice, I don't make decisions the same way everybody else does?
Well, I think a lot of it, we have ministry backgrounds and that kind of thing too.
That's right. Yeah, well, you know church and God. And
Yeah, and I think something that's, for whatever reason, maybe it's the certain lineup of my strengths, having those repetitive conversations about leadership and things not working out the way everybody thinks they should be working out. For me, I'm very much so well, if I don't align with this, I'm going to change directions. Whereas so many people just get stuck and become comfortable with it and almost concede to certain ideas, whatever. And then they get stuck in that and live their whole life in that. And that for me was a very frustrating experience as somebody transitioning from youthhood to adulthood. Yeah. Just being I see so much for you, you see so much for me, but it's not hard for me to move on and go change it up, but it's very hard for other people to do that. Yeah. That's probably the first time I really noticed that.
So kind of that window, kind of as you're finishing high school, because one thing I want to wonder about is Futuristic is number 1. It showed up as number 1 both times for you. futuristic, a couple different things, right? Futuristic is vision, but it's also potential. Meaning, sometimes futuristic, I have people with futuristic say, yeah, I kind of have an idea of what I'd like my life to look like when I'm 50,
Sure.
if you're 25 or whatever.
Yeah.
And so there's that, which is a long-term vision of the future and you want to reverse engineer. But the essence of futuristic is potential. So I have people with futuristic who'll say, they'll be in a restaurant eating a sandwich and say things like, oh my God, this would be amazing if only I added pickles.
Yeah.
And what's funny is, it's not just true for you now, but what a lot of people say, people will respond and say, well, you shouldn't have got the sandwich. And like, oh no, I'm not complaining. I'm just saying it would be amazing if they'd added pickles next time.
Yeah, like this could be so much better.
I had somebody one time, they're like, weddings are kind of a nightmare because they're like, you're there, but you're going, man, if only they'd had different flowers. Well, the music could have been X. And it's not like you're critiquing, but your brain goes, what's the upgrade?
Absolutely. Oh, and that's just like, God bless Perry for being married to somebody like that, because I don't stop. Like it is with every facet of our life. Like I'm on like my version of maternity leave right now. And so I'm spending a lot of time inside, sitting in our living room, and of course, only a couple weeks can go by before I am pulling out the ladder and freaking painting that whole space, because I'm just like, oh,
I saw the pictures this week.
Yeah. It's just
the living room is getting
me
painted
nuts.
on her maternity leave.
I'm like, I just need to address this right now. It's like, I just have to take action once I accept that idea in my head or whatever. But yeah.
That's a good question, because I was saying, it changes different phases of our life. I think we use our themes differently. And so obviously when activator ideation kick in, you're like, okay, I have to do this right now.
Yeah.
And so you painted a beautiful mantelpiece
Yep.
or the wall beside the mantelpiece in your living room. I saw it on your Instagram this week. But are you aware of what will reign in that futuristic? When you're like, I see potential, it's not mine to make real. When is the gap of, I see potential that isn't my responsibility, and I see potential that, man, to not step into that would not be to be all of who I could be, or it would be doing a disservice to us, to my husband, to me, to my family.
Oh, absolutely.
When have you ever had moments where you're like, I can see it and enjoy it, but not be governed by having to act on it?
There are so many people that I look up to as a creative. So, I'm mainly in like the oil painting space right now. And there will be people I look up to who are super talented interior designers or chefs, and they're making cookbooks. And I think in my earlier 20s, I wanted to admire those people and then almost immerse myself in their world and try that kind of stuff. And the older that I've gotten, I've learned how to see people who are amazing and just appreciate them for who they are and not need to like deconstruct how that works, because when I do that, it's like I black out for weeks almost. Like I just like everything erupts and my life, it just goes to chaos. Like, so I have kids and, kids are naturally very, they're just like so curious about everything. Yeah. And
curious and disruptive in their own way as they dive in.
And it's like, I can be very childlike, very naturally in my own way too. And so if my daughter's like, oh, I want to know how to like make my own stuffed animal, I'm like, yes, we're going to pull out the sewing machine. We're going to like pick patterns and go buy fabric together. And then for like 5 days, our house is going to turn into like a factory. And that is
Build-A-Bear in Mariah's living room.
Like the laundry stops getting done. Like that is like, that is fun for me, and then I burn out. And so it's knowing that I can't exist in that space. Like, even though that space is really fun and exciting for me, as a mom, I have to reel it in because I have a household to manage and kids to take care of and like structure that still has to happen for them. Yeah. And that was probably one of the hardest things for me in becoming a mom, is learning that I have to balance that, and I almost have to create certain restraints around when I allow myself to have that time to get completely lost in something and go crazy on something. It's okay, it's amazing, but it has to happen within like a certain constraint. So
yeah, because I think that's the key, right? Is that what gives you possibility and options? Because especially with having had adaptability before, adaptability and ideation, it's about choices that create options versus choices that create too much closure. And knowing the difference. And so there are times where it's like, what will this choice give me something? It's funny because we've talked about adaptability before, in that I often say people with adaptability, when you ask them what they want, they may struggle with saying they want one thing specifically, but they often will say, you'll say, what do you want for dinner? I don't care, whatever you want. And you're like, well, let's have Mexican. Well, I had Mexican last night. I don't want Mexican. So you kind of know what you don't want before you know what you do want. Mm-hmm. And so kind of reverse engineering of, okay, I like this, but I don't want this to happen. I don't want this to happen. But anything in between those would be fine.
Yeah. And it's interesting that being paired with an activator, because for me, I'm very much so like, I'm not going to know until I try it. Yeah. So I will try it.
Yes. The test driving of it. And that, which is, because that was the one thing I was going to ask, is that, so activator is an executing theme, which is all about creating momentum. You and I both share activator. We shared command. We don't have command anymore. Yep. You have command. I have command. It's still there, but it didn't show up in this. Activator in this moment. Activator is about creating momentum, naturally getting things started. And so one of the things of activator is pretty strong for people. I often say it's this idea that a mistake can be corrected, but a missed opportunity is gone forever. Yep. But it's also like a bicycle has to be moving in order to be steered. Like you can't steer, like has to create momentum.
Yes.
So one of the things I often say is people with activator, we're really great at this idea of prototyping. You can test it out.
Yep.
Just go for the test. What I was thinking about before the call is because I know a little bit of your husband's profile.
Yeah.
He actually has responsibility.
Yes.
Okay. Which responsibility is what exactly is expected of me.
Yeah.
I'm going to flop dead across the finish line. My word is my bond.
Yeah.
I'd rather die than let you down. Whereas with us, we'll test drive things.
Yep.
We'll try things. Specifically, we talk about in my when I'm coaching clients, we talk about closing the gaps of what you want with a thing called HEAT, which is HEAT, habits, experiments, attitude, and time. And I love to call out that experiments are things people do purely for the information. They don't need to work.
Yeah.
Just to learn. Well, we're great at experiments.
Yeah, that's fine.
But you're married to someone who wants a plan, not an experiment.
Yeah, for real. It is quite the dynamic.
When did you guys figure that out? Where he's like, oh, wait.
Right away.
Not everything she says I need to do. Yes. Some of this is her experiments and they're not my experiments.
Yes. I mean, it's quite fantastic. I often think about, where would I be in life if I wouldn't have met my husband at such a young age? Because honestly, I think I would be living on the beach somewhere, in a van, making so many decisions on a whim. And for real, it worries me the thought of it. So I'm like, thank God I met him, because he's done such a fantastic job he absorbs all the thoughts and the ideas that I have. I don't want to say that he's like a stone wall, but he knows that if he gives me the time and space, that those things will kind of naturally suss themselves out, and I'll kind of be able to determine, is this actually something that's important to me? Or is it just, something that's just on a whim, really grabbing my attention at the moment? So he's really been able to help me with all of that kind of stuff. And I remember even when we met, I mean, we were 18. So we were so young. I was living with my parents, and I was at the church that I had been at my whole life. I was working there as well. And he was the person who was hearing I had all these dreams and ideas and things I wanted to do. But he was like, you need to actually step out and go for it. And he was like, if we're going to be married, I want you to go and live on your own and have that experience before we get married. Or if you want to be working in video production, why aren't you starting your own business? All these he was just very pragmatic about the things that I wanted to do, and he was able to break them down into steps more so for me.
He's so good at that.
Yeah, it's so great having that sounding board for somebody who, for me, I just I see it in a million pieces, and he kind of helps.
What about
me
it? How are you able to? Because I know people that will have an idea. I think of couples, and again, people watching this sometimes, where they're well, they almost need the other person has to agree, or they have to agree to take it on, or co-sign. I always say co-sign my crap or whatever. But I'm finding that space for the two of you where you're there are times where as a couple, you guys have made choices about houses and moving and different things like that, and there are things that aren't just seasons for you, where you're Perry, we need to do this, and you do it. How do you know those moments of how do you find peace where you're like, you know what? I can have my own mind and like, this is okay that it's my obsession right now, or it's my interest. He doesn't need to be on board, and he doesn't need to be okay with me even being done or quitting or starting or changing because you've made major choices.
Yes.
I'm curious about the dynamic of, because there's navigating independently as a woman and a professional and an artist, and navigating as a couple, which is, this is my partner and I overlap. And you have very clear sense of motion and you guys operate at different speeds.
We do.
What has found that work where you're like, you know what, this is, because I'm very reactive or I'm very aware about the stimulus. This is when I know I need to tap my partner.
Yeah.
How do you make that call?
I think there's a lot of mutual respect between the two of us, obviously. And so when I am in my zone, in my flow, Perry, thank God he doesn't look at me and he's like, oh, there she goes again. I think he sees like, that's like where I like recharge, And so hopefully I'm coming out of that like as a better version of myself, especially as a mom. I have to push so much of that away that when I do get the time and space to do that, it's like a recharge for me. And so I'm going to like come out,
well said, hopefully
being a better mother and better wife. And for him, I'm always like, it's so important for you to have your hobbies, and he works so hard. I want to like see him like being able to unwind and stuff. And so when he does, it's like exciting for me. It's almost like a little funny for me. He's like super into baseball cards right now. And I'm just like, it's like, it's just, so good. It's just so funny. But I'm like, I see the value in it too. And so I'm just like, I respect that. And you need to have the time and space to do that too. You deserve it,
And that's well said too. Because one of the things, when it comes to using our strengths to navigate, if the outside world can't fill you up, you have to navigate from the inside. One of the things we say is that CliftonStrengths can help you choose, but they also can help you. We always say they help you understand what you bring to the table, but also what you need. And so this idea of knowing this is actually, wait a minute, I actually need to have this creative space. Some life is going to be repetitive. I don't need all of it to be changing, but this is the engine that lets me be focused, that it keeps me going, and knowing what themes are needed at what time. I think it's a good call.
Yes, it's hard to figure that out on your own, especially as like Perry and I have been self-employed for like a lot of our careers as well. And so we're learning like that is very different than being on a team. Right. And you may be very good at pushing yourself as an entrepreneur or as a solopreneur. And grinding and just being able to put in the time. But those skills look completely different when they're applied to a team or to leading people. It's like, it's just fascinating kind of dissecting all of that. Yeah,
to make it all work. Because, people always say to me that I get asked a lot, especially in teams that I work on. They're always like, hey, what's the perfect strengths mix for a team? Like, what kind of themes should they have to go together? And same thing in married couples. Like, what's the perfect mix of a couple? And what's fascinating is that Gallup's research was like, oh, the mix of the couple has almost nothing to do with whether or not they're successful. It was how clearly each person could describe, this is what I do well, but they could describe, this is what this person does well, and I could never do that.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting.
It was the ability to say they knew their strengths, but they were so clear. But, Perry brings this.
Yeah.
And they said, and the third thing was they kind of knew what mission they were on together. Like, this is their mission. Their family was the mission, or they want to have this kind of impact in the world. And so they said type of strengths they didn't have to have certain themes overlapping or a different mix. It was, did you know the strengths of your partner and what they brought that you could never bring?
That's really cool, because that's like any couple, they can like bring that to the table. And even if their strengths are whatever, it's more the intent. Totally.
Cool. Do you ever with Maximizer in your profile? Maximizer is an influencing theme that is really unique in that it's not commonly occurring. It's extremely high performing. So you had Command before. Command was the rarest theme in the world. So statistically, Command shows up the least. I don't know, almost 31 billion people have taken CliftonStrengths. Command shows up the least of anyone. So that's still obviously, so your first set of results is the most accurate. So that's still in there. But Maximizer and Command are in the same section. So Maximizer, Command says, someone has to be leading well. Maximizers are like, will I ever be as great as I know I could be? You want to do things where it's, they always say that competition, when competition is running a race and they're at a finish line, they look over their shoulder to see who they beat. Maximizer looks at their watch.
Yeah.
To see if they beat themselves.
That is so real. That's
like you're the bar. Even while you have other artists you admire, you're the bar. Does that feel real for you?
Yeah, yes. I very much so have like the mindset. It's like your stereotypical tortured artist in a way. It's just like I know where I could get, but I feel like I don't have enough time to get there, or I don't know. It's like it doesn't feel like I'm fully living in my potential. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and how do you live in that? Because that's one of those challenges for maximizers, is that it is this whole discontent.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. Yeah.
This constant discontent. Is that you have to live, is that learning to live in that tension? Because I can only imagine, and I know some of your story and some of the things you've done, like professionally.
Yep.
The people will be like, but you're so great. But the voice in your head of, no. But to say I'm this means I have to be here. And if I'm not going to get there, why do it?
Yeah, absolutely. That is like the trope of so many of the famous artists, like of the 20th century and 21st century. It's this idea of just, everyone around me is moving at their own speed, and I am moving at my own speed, but it's not fast enough. And especially me becoming a mom at the young age that I did, it was like I was looking at all of my peers, and while they're doing all these things that I would love to be doing, I'm like at home with my baby, and I'm very much so putting my life on pause, and I can't run at the pace that they are. So it's very humbling in a way. And I think it's a great, it's a great test of your character, because you're like, okay, I really need to know where my values are. And obviously raising my kids and them being loved and me being present is above all of that. Sure. But it doesn't push away that desire at all. That desire is still like always there in me to be able to just like go crazy. Go crazy in like a good way. But
how do you find, if you look back, are there moments that taught you to define what your own standard is? Because I think part of what you're describing as we mature as adults and people and parents for yourselves, and even as a partner, as a wife, this idea of going, well, I'm maximizing, maybe I'm not being maximized compared to that standard or someone else's standard. How do I redefine what a maximized version of this moment looks like for me? How do I recognize that, you know what? The best version of being a mom today is completely different than it's going to be tomorrow.
Yes.
But today, this is what maximized mom looks like.
Yeah. It's like,
you know what I'm saying?
Yes. It's almost like there's these different avenues going on in your life. And today you can like completely rock the laundry rotation and the meal planning and staying on top of things. And then the next day you can rock out like the oil painting thing and whatever. And in that moment, it feels unbalanced, but over a broad enough time horizon, it sort of evens itself out. And just the nature of having kids, it's like certain seasons, it feels like it's 6 months of me living in that laundry meal prepping space. And like they like really, really need me at that point in time. And I think as I got more down the road with having kids, I kind of realized it does all sort of even itself out. And that's been like, that brings me a lot of peace, because I'm like, okay, this season particularly is very challenging, but I know that it's not going to be like this forever. And so just like kind of trusting the process. And even like in postpartum, you're like, all this stuff is happening. But the third time around, you're like, it's totally going to be fine. It is going to work itself out. Thank God. And
it's so interesting the way you've tapped, because that's the interesting part, is that you're tapping. I mean, it's such a gift to be able to tap in that futuristic versus like, and also to the maximizer, because I mean, you've had, I think, as much as you want to share, I remember you telling me like, that postpartum period and the struggle, because your brain didn't have context of, is this what motherhood's going to be?
No.
So the first time, having no framework of that,
you're like,
and being in it,
always going to be how it feels?
And how that went that first time postpartum. That's a big challenge.
Yes, that activated in me a ton of anxiety, because I was just like, oh my gosh, is this what the next 10 years is going to feel like for me?
Right.
And,
and
I
now
don't know
at time 3, your brain's like, this is how this is supposed to feel. Oh, at week 6, this is what happens.
Yes, exactly. Right. Oh, yeah. That was
it's a big shift.
Yeah, it is. And there's no rule book. There's no map like
there's no
we were
map.
talking about earlier. Especially with like postpartum in particular, it's like already something that people are really private about.
Right.
And like I am more of an external processor, and so I like it's helpful for me to be an open book about that kind of stuff. That's probably around the time that I met you.
Right.
If you were working with us in 2018, I would have been like right coming out of that. And it's, I'm already in my mid-20s, like trying to find who I am. On top of that, I'm having an identity crisis because I just became a mom. Right. It's like... Dear God. So the strengths at that point in time would have been so incredibly helpful for me, because it's like, okay, at least I can kind of like discern elements of who I am, even though it's all being shaken up right now. Yeah.
You know what's interesting too is if we step into unpacking when things work, when they don't work, right? We always say a great strengths approach to anything is map when it works so you know how to fix it when it doesn't work. And so what's interesting is that if we look back, we took that as an example of why baby 3 can feel different, is that you have different perspective, is that I wondered, if you think about other times when you do feel frustration again, or pain or struggle, I wonder how many times it'll be because the future's not clear.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. That it could be because, think about it, hormonally, chemically, fatigue-wise, your brain can't see beyond the moment of the 2 a.m. feedings and you haven't slept in 10 weeks.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But simultaneously, there'll be new situations where you're like, wait, I don't know what this looks like in 3 years. And it'd be interesting, is it true, have you experienced the fact that when Futuristic is off, suddenly the moment seems way more heightened or way more reactive?
Absolutely. I mean... just think about the startup that Perry and I are doing.
Oh yeah, that's right.
It's like, I mean,
I forgot about that.
Yeah, that is like the most challenging thing we've ever done as a couple. It's not something where you can just walk in and go bang, bang, bang. Like if I just grind hard enough, if I just work hard enough, this is going to succeed. It's not like that at all. It's like a very complex thing to have to grow. And so I literally have no idea what that looks like in 3 years. And I think about that all the time. My brain is always trying to figure out like, what is this going to look like in 3 years? How do I reverse engineer? Like I do a lot of reverse engineering in my head all the time. And I don't know if that's a futuristic thing.
That's activator. Activator reverse. We reverse engineer. We're like, well, if we want to go there, well, that means that next week we should do this.
I'm like, I need to like pull the layers back, and then that gives me some sort of like security that at least if we do like these certain things, I can feel like we're moving towards that. But with that, our startup in many ways, I'm just like, this is a whole new animal, and like we are in the moment gaining the skills to deal with it. Like we're not going into it having
but
them.
But it's got to be frustrating to feel like, man, it's taking so much of my mental space, and you're like, why is it taking up so much mental space? And it can take up a lot of energy. And you're like, I'm thinking about all these things, and it'll ultimately be because your brain can't see it. In some ways. Yep,
totally. And then the other things that you do see, you can kind of let them go to the back burner and trust the process in a way.
And I think that's part of the challenge. Just as two pieces of information, two thoughts of advice, is that any time that you're like, wow, okay, it's fine if the thinking about the startup is engaging, then terrific. But if not, then being able to say, you know what, I need to put this in a box. Well, here's what I do know. It's going to look like this 12 months from now. I'm like, to really kind of lean into as much of this is what I do know. And what am I okay with not knowing? And just kind of start to draw some frameworks because start to tamp down the noise a little bit.
That's really good. Because it's
You know
like,
what I'm saying?
yeah, you just are, you know, you have those moments where you're laying awake at night and your brain's just running. And
Yeah.
like, I'm trying to work on that intentionally right now, more so having awareness and control of the voice that's happening inside my head all the time. And that alone is like, so I literally named it and I named like my brain. It's this book.
It's a good call.
It's very helpful because you're
100%.
like, whoa, this is chaos in here. If I just like let it go free.
Yeah. Because especially with ideation activator. So because it is, we talk, you know, ideation is true outside the box thinking. It's true innovation. It's thinking that says one idea leads to another, which leads to another, which leads to another. And so I tell people, they're like, what does it sound like? I said, imagine you're driving to work and you see a blue awning on a storefront. And the blue awning reminds you of the beach at Turks and Caicos, which reminds you of the best vacation you ever had, which reminds you that it's a date night, which reminds you that you didn't call the restaurant or you used open table to make it, which reminds you left the number on the counter, which is beside the keys, and now you're driving to work and you have no keys for your office.
Yeah.
But it started with a blue awning.
Yeah,
right?
it's like when Perry looks at me and he's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I'm probably sitting there with like a scowl on my face and I'm like, 50 things. Like,
You're right? It's like a squirrel.
Do you want me to like explain Yeah,
and the ability. And so one of the things here's the challenge ultimately, is that I often say for people, because again, if you're imagining you're navigating, you're making choices, imagine you guys are trying to decide about the business, or this startup and your own businesses, is that the noise can get in the way, right? Sometimes this noise is inspiring, sometimes it's not. One of the things I've talked about with, I worked with athletes, a lot of Olympic athletes over the years, and one of them will tell me he had ideation, strategic, and activator. So even more crazy than you and I, our activator. But his shows up in the fact that he'll have a race plan. So he'll be getting ready to race. And so he has to swim, then bike, then run. And so he knows he's supposed to be running at a certain pace by the time he gets off the bike. But suddenly he's running with somebody who's running faster than he expected. And he's like, ooh, well, maybe they're in better shape than I am. Or, well, maybe if I should do this. And he'll start to plan out 19 scenarios, ignoring the fact that, look, everybody overruns for the first 60 seconds everybody does. Don't make a decision right then. Don't react. So we have this thing where we'll say, which is when you get off the bike and you start to run, you can't look up for 60 seconds.
Jeez.
Meaning, in other words, you can't let in the stimulus.
Yeah. And like,
so
how many scenarios does that apply to in real life? Yeah.
Right. And so that ends up being the thing where I've learned for me, I can't ask my brain not to react, but I can create guardrails to keep stuff out of my brain as much as possible.
Yes. That's really good.
And so the voice in your head, whatever her name is, or his
Carol.
name in your head, is the ability to go, I only feed them at certain times a day. Like a pet.
Yeah, no, for real. That's so good. This is,
and keep it on a schedule.
Yes. I just started reading fantasy again. I don't ever read fantasy or fiction books.
Yeah.
And I'm about to finish one. And I'm like, the reason this is so enjoyable is because my thoughts are stopping like for a little bit. It's like my brain can actually have a chance to relax for a second while I'm like fully immersed in another world. I'm like, oh, this is so
because
refreshing.
The rules of that world are different and you don't have to apply them to your own.
Yeah. Yes.
If you're reading books that are based in current reality, you're actually going, well, in that situation, if I was a mother in that story who did this, but it's a world where,
the stakes aren't high. Yeah.
Stakes are high. They're gonna fly on the backs of dragons and do all kinds of other interesting things, or whatever.
Brad
Sanderson novels, or The Wing. I can't remember. Fourth Wing.
Yeah, the Fourth Wing is the next big one. Yeah,
right? Yeah. So, but in that world, there's something about it for us with activator ideation in that we are able to go. I can think about a thing that I don't have to wonder, is that an odd reaction? Well, because I've never been to a planet where they do this.
Yes. And it's taken me so long to be willing to do this. I wonder if it's because of the maximizer, because I often have a hard time letting myself just enjoy reading this book.
Yes.
You don't have to get anything out of it. You don't have to, doesn't have to help you level up in some crazy way.
Well, what you have to realize is it's a lot like mental hygiene, where it's the equivalent of, it's the equivalent of mental flossing or mouthwash.
That's what it feels like. It literally feels like that. Yeah, it's like my brain just feels cleaner.
And so the maximizer part of you, especially with some of the command, a good leader, a good mother, if that voice is in there, especially you and I both grew up in places of faith.
Yes.
Well, this is what a good person does.
Yeah.
A good whatever. That can be in there. And so it doesn't feel like there's nothing measured or seen, So just turn that off and say, actually, this is about stretching at the end of a run. This is about flossing before you go to bed at night. God knows I need to do it more.
Yes.
And so letting your brain with activator ideation have that, you're like, maybe I need that time.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, it's taken me years to let myself take up a fiction book. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it doesn't, if only I hustled harder, maybe our business would be better. You're like, no.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's going to do what it's going to do at the timing it does.
Is like Maximizer turn people into like chronic podcast consumers? Because I'm like, just like all day, every day listening to as many podcasts as I can all the time too.
I think honestly, it's a little bit of ideation as well. And that is that ideation is you're like somewhere in there could be some interesting information that it might apply to something. And so it doesn't have to be a similar flavor. It can be everything from, everything about, environmental issues to fabric to fiction to art to murder podcast. I don't know, whatever it's going to be. And so ideation naturally, the adaptability ideation, your brain is very, very responsive. And so the trick, again, the biggest thing to do I would say is don't work to control your brain as much as work to control about what you're like, endless amounts of podcasts is totally useful for right now. Oh, when do I need that off? Oh, when I need to do X.
Yeah.
And knowing how to turn off the external, don't try to force yourself into control. Control the external that comes in.
Wow. This is very good information for me.
You know what I'm saying? Like letting yourself, because here's the thing, your brain actually will grab hold of what is useful by itself once the external noise comes in.
Yeah.
Once the external noise stops, once that's like filtered or it's a little more, and you're like, even if you're like, I don't want to necessarily stop all the podcasts, but I'm like, you know what? I'm actually going to filter and only do these type of podcasts on this variety. I need I'll endlessly stream about this topic. Even that will start to drop out certain noise that you didn't know was actually bothering you.
Yep, that's so good and so important.
I kind of, before I steal your entire night, but I want to hit you up on Relator, because Relator's a fascinating theme.
Yep.
In that people
I don't
are
even
always
remember
like,
what it is.
Right? People are like, Relator is all about authentic relationships, but they're like, I'm not really friendly. What's fascinating about Relator is people think about friendly, they actually think about woo, which is a social one, which winning others over, high forms of social intelligence. Perry has woo.
Perry, I don't know if it's one of his strengths, but he's always been a very woo.
He's a very woo kind of guy. There are no strangers, only friends he hasn't met yet. Okay, Relator, what's interesting is that Relator, they prefer authentic relationships. But here's the thing, they have many acquaintances, few friends. So I often say Relators, you do this thing where you project intimacy and safety. So we feel very safe with you. And so what we always say, like, Relators, I run into you and we're standing in line at Kohl's or something at the department store somewhere nearby. And it's like, hi, how are you? My brain goes, oh my God, this woman really wants to know. And so I overshare.
Yes.
But then I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm telling a stranger too much information. Hey, Mariah, tell me your story. And you're like, yeah, no. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, totally.
Because Relators, they make us feel safe, but they typically are extremely private.
Yeah. Yeah.
Core relationships, people they've known a long time. Their friends are usually like 5 to 6 people.
Yeah. They're all people like either from my childhood or from high school. Yep. And like, it's definitely been harder for me to form new, deep friendships as an adult.
Yes. Yes. Because it requires a whole lot of intentionality in a different way.
It does. And it's like, it's just tough. It's, in one sense, like I can easily become that person who is oversharing because I want to like offer up a bit of information for relational capital with people to see if like we can like
connect,
find something in the middle there, especially as a mom, like it's just, that is a fun aspect of, you're at the playground and you start chit-chatting and then all of a sudden you're like, I had postpartum depression and my kid had all these issues and she got this surgery, like It's so funny, like moms just like, yeah, that you can just go
They'll
there
just go
pretty
there.
quickly. But in other circumstances, it's like, yeah, it's learning how to like allow that and also like not at the same time. It's interesting.
Having said, you know, it's interesting because again, when it comes to navigating your life, I think you have to be recharged. And I'll often have people with relators say to me, there's nothing more comforting than quality time with people you don't have to explain yourself to.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Like, I think of one of my closest friends when she comes over, it's like, we're hardly even chatting. We're just like in each other's company. And you can hear, you know, about how the week went, but you're not having to like explain like this existential thing. You just like know the essence of who each other are, you know?
Yeah.
And that is very comforting for me. And it's tough because you want more of that, but that takes so much time to get there with somebody.
Yes.
And so, yeah, you kind of get a little pigeonholed almost.
Yeah. Relators will actually say to me, like it's funny you mentioned that, is that one of the key things in relationship is time. And it says that's silly, but they're like, you can have connection. Relators can have a connection with you and feel authentically with you, but it won't be real until they see it through all the seasons.
Yeah.
And so they need a window of time before you get the label of it differently. This is going to sound like an odd question, but I've had relators say to me, I'm really struggling making decisions right now. Or, you know what, I'm trying to navigate something and I find myself frustrated, or I don't necessarily trust myself. And I'll be like, and I'll look through their profile and see her later. And then one of my first questions will be, do you have a core relationship in your life, somebody you love or trust, who has suddenly begun behaving in a way you didn't expect? Meaning a girlfriend who unexpectedly divorced their husband, or someone who betrayed a family member, or a brother who you discovered had, you know, was struggling with something that, you know, imagine like, I think little kids with drugs and things like that, you know.
Yes.
Where I'm like, have you ever noticed? And they're like, wait, why? And I'll be like, because relators spend so much time vetting people to know who they are so they're safe, that when suddenly a core relationship behaves out of character, their brain goes, how did I miss that? And if I missed that, what else did I miss? Whoa. And what am I not seeing? And my decision making at work? And what about this? And suddenly job decisions at the office become difficult because their brother said they're leaving their wife.
Honestly,
does that resonate?
Yes, it does. Because when I've had these types of scenarios happen to me, it almost consumes me. Like the idea, like let's say it's like something going on with a friendship and there's like a fracture there of some sort. Like I become so uneasy because I want to really understand fully what's going on there. And you know, that person, it might even not be a thing for them, or they're just like, there's other factors going on, or they might not like need to share that with you, whatever. That is really interesting. That's because your
brain, what happens at that moment, the relator brain does it works so hard to authentically know people that, and once it's done, like, oh, it's safe. And so it's not even categorization, bad or good. It's non-judgmental. It's this person is this. When that suddenly doesn't play out, their brain has to start to unspool all the decision making on it. And it's not even about obsessing about that person, but finding that piece of going, okay, wow, this is going, and I would say, embrace the fact that it's going to disrupt you and just be aware that you should be cautious in that space. That you're going to question yourself more in ways that you wouldn't normally. And there's nothing really for you to fix other than to recognize, oh, wait, I knew this person, their context has changed, and sometimes people change, but I didn't get this wrong. Who I knew was there, that's just not who they are right now.
Whoa, that you are a mind reader, Mike. It's very interesting how much of this, like the fact that you hit that on the head. It's very interesting.
Yeah, because people will get concerned and wonder and worry. And ultimately, I'm going, there's nothing to fix. Just so you know, your mind, it needs that stability of those relationships in that time.
Yeah.
To actually feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Was there anything in your themes, before I keep you too long and let you go, was there anything in your themes that you were like, I was curious about this, or that we didn't cover and hit? Because I mean, I think it's being so useful to hear you talk about how you navigate. I mean, people will really enjoy kind of hearing all the different levels.
Well, prior to me having this baby, I went through this very like a boom in my business.
Yeah.
And I got pregnant, and then I got very sick for my first trimester and then my third trimester. And so it naturally put a huge pause on things, and my body stopped and my brain didn't. And so that was like kind of like a tortured creative experience for me.
Which is a disassociation is real. Like your body and brain not being connected. That's hard.
Yes. And so now, I had my baby. She's awesome. She's the easiest baby that we've had. And so because I have my Futuristic, I'm going, okay, what am I gonna like start focusing on? What's the next 6 months gonna look like? And I'm kind of at like another crossroads again. Yeah. And so I'm starting to process that. And a lot of the things that I focus on my first year of having a baby, like having an infant, having a newborn, look very much so towards my home, obviously, because they're so dependent on me. Yeah. And then with my last two kids, it was like that 1 year calendar mark hit, and there was so much creative energy there all of a sudden. And so I'm sort of just like, I'm starting to process that and like know that very well much, that might be another thing that happens.
Yep.
And so I'm trying to this time like be more responsible with what that looks like and intentional about what it looks like. That's very much so on my mind right now. I know that this is probably our last baby too. And so it's like, I'm just starting to think about that next chapter in my life and what I want it to look like. And and so
I think finding that process of like going backwards, even so if we could, it doesn't have to be the same, and it might be a different time. It might be before a year, it might be later. But we know that you're going to grow past having a 1 year old and having infants and toddlers. Yep. That's coming. So we know that's coming. And the creative part of you is not going to go anywhere. It's going to need an outlet. And so knowing how do I plan of like, I need experimental space, and I need to also have that space that allows me to prepare to select my greatness for the next season.
Yeah.
The maximizer part of you will it's likely with Futuristic Activator and Ideation that it's like, okay, in the future I can see the season of me like letting all the stuff that's kind of dormant, like tulip bulbs, kind of come back to the surface.
Yeah. Yep.
But then also going, and within that though, how might I spot the thing that will be my focus for the next season? Because here's the thing, Mariah, I would encourage you that there will likely be multiple seasons where you'll be exceptional at a thing that you'll then move on to something else on.
Yeah. That's probably going to go on for the rest of my life.
It's going to go on. And so you have a business right now. And in fact, you may be like, you know what? I want to continue this business, but only doing this.
Yeah.
I would like this part where I'm like, I know I have a thing that works and it's here. I'm going to create and let this be, but this part of it, I'm going to let that fall off.
Yeah.
And like one of the big pieces I'll do with clients a lot of times is we now have we're kind of creating almost like a life plan moment. Cool. And one of the things we do is we actually we say the surest way to figure out if the moment matters is to zoom out as far as you can. So we'll pick a date of their death and work backwards.
Cool.
So we make them write an obituary. So you pick a date of your death, a cause worth your life, the things you overcame, and 3 things you want people to say about you when you're gone. So imagine your grandkids or your kids or things like that.
Very cool.
But what you start to realize is that I'm like, especially for someone as young as you are still, is that there's actually probably going to be like 3 major things. Like the thing you're working on won't even be the big thing. Yeah. And so to go, I've got to do it perfect, or people are upset that I'm moving on, or, it seems like I'm leaving things in the dust. No, but there'll be a couple things that you'll want to be known for. Mm-hmm. So thinking about systemically that I'm going to have seasons of, you know what? I know there's a creative season that comes when I shift roles in my head. Within that, then there'll be a kind of really be free.
Yes.
Then there'll be a season of this really captures me and creates some greatness in me. And I'm going to run it down until I decide it's there. And then I'll step back, I'll assess, and then I'll do it again. If you can start to map out, look backwards from basically 20 till now, and go,
okay, this is how it works. I'm in a role. So the free parts that are creative kind of drop off because because I can't. I'm working as an editor. I've got to do X.
Yeah.
Then you're like, or I'm a mom right now.
Yep.
Okay. But so then I have creative season. Then I have deep dive season. Then I have assess, enjoy, breathe. Then maybe go back to creative again. If you can create a map for yourself, like these are almost like the rhythms of a garden.
Well, yeah. Ooh.
And you plan it that way in your head. So then you're like, there are things you do in winter, right? You get all your stuff ready for gardening season. There's things you do in spring where like people love to put away the leaves and put the beds to bed and all those things like that. Is that so you know that, hey, I'm in 6 weeks of this. I've got a long 10 months, more months before creative comes. But here's what I do now though. I prep for that. Because I know this is the season.
I want to do this. I want to like actually write that out because I'm even thinking of like touring artists and people who write music and come out with albums and they go on a tour. There's very much so a cycle to all of that creativity. But when you're somebody who's just like an online presence, you aren't like in a gallery, you're like just fully doing it solopreneur style. There's this pressure to just always be in that season of like excellence, and it's just not feasible for anybody to live in that all the time. And so it's
a hunger. That's the hard part about. So the good news is about social media and the internet. It magnifies. The challenge is that it has a hunger that's never satisfied.
Yes.
And so a maximizer part will go, what is great enough, especially with maximizer, or what was good enough last year won't be good enough today.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then it'll change. And what was great, and so it's such a changing dynamic. That's where I'm like, you have to take it inside and kind of be like, oh, actually, this is terrific. I'm able to do this and I'll help this many people and create this much work that I'm so proud of.
Yep.
That's all I need. And should that change, that's because it'll come out of a creative season, not because something external, especially for you with command. Mm-hmm. The more you're pushed or told to do something, the less likely you're going to be interested in doing it.
Absolutely. It's just like, that is so funny.
And so and so here's another way but when it comes to growth, I will say this as well. One thing that I do with clients when we're trying to figure out, so we'll do the obituary, then we do a 10-year, 5-year, and then the 1 year is kind of what we're working on because it's coaching contract for a year. Mm-hmm. And so that 1 year, one of the things we'll do in that 1 year segment is kind of figure out what the big areas are. So artist, or Perry, he's such an entrepreneur creator. Yep. But so artist, usually there's a physical thing. Hey, I want to be in health or financial, family, marriage, 3 or 4 areas.
Yep.
And then I'll say, okay, if 10 is thriving and fully alive and 1 is suffering, like in pain and misery, where you're holding out for dear life, on these areas of, let's say, as an artist, where am I right now? On a rung of 10 ladder, a ladder of 10 rungs, where would you put yourself? And so they'll be like, oh, as a father, I'm a 7, but honestly, fulfillment and purpose of my job, I'm a 3, whatever. And we kind of quickly put a rung to it. So take your gut, pick an area, and this actually works in almost any scenario. You're like, so as a creative person, how creative are you? Take a ladder, 10 rungs, grab whatever number comes up, and then instantly ask yourself, what 3 things would have to be true for me to have said 2 rungs higher?
Ooh, I like that because it's not like me being a 10.
No.
But like,
there's a reason why you didn't say 8 and you said 6. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Why? But your brain didn't tell you that. It just picked a rung. And so you're like, well, if I felt like I knew my seasons of being creative are this, if I knew that, by the end of summer, I had 3 different pieces that I felt really proud of or whatever, or suddenly you have your framework. Give yourself a rung, kind of stick your gut at kind of temperature to see where am I at, and then, just two rungs up. What would I have to do on any area and be like, I could do that. So how do I make a plan for that?
That's fantastic. There. Instead of always feeling like you're just living in this like low rung space and you don't know where exactly you are, or you're not being honest with yourself about where you are. You're pushing it aside, trying not to think about it.
You'd be excited about being 2 rungs up.
Yes. I mean, I love that because it's not impossible to do that. It's very realistic.
In fact, we'll say a lot of times when we're building these steps and ladders, like when we actually get to the part where, so we'll break that into like 30-day sprints. and then 10-day calls. So we do 3 calls a month, every 10 days over the course of a month. And I'm like, what 3 things would you be most excited about having done in the next 10 days? And we're like, whatever, it should feel exciting. We always say strengths are things that make you feel strong, and that energy is meant to give you the energy to keep going. And so when we do lists, it's not about accountability and action. It's about, wait a minute, you living into these goals of being 2 rungs higher should give you life. If it feels hard, it is too high. I had a woman who needed to quit an architectural firm, and she's like, I know that I need to start my own firm. My firm's dying. They've told me I'm going to start it. I know what I need to do, but I haven't had time. I have to write this thing before I file the paperwork with the state of California. And so I was like, well, you got the papers. Could you go do it? That was going to be your thing. That was too high. Well, then could you write out the thing? That was too much. Literally, we broke it into, could you spend 1 hour at the Starbucks by your house between now and our next call, sitting with a laptop, thinking, doing nothing but thinking about this business you want to have 3 years from now? Just commit to the 1 hour of thinking. I don't care if you write, I don't care if you do anything else. That became the rung. So when she kept that promise to herself, I'm like, now could you do that twice and maybe sketch out notes about this thing? And then that became the written thing, which became the send it thing. But we literally, at the end of the day, Mariah, if it seems overwhelming, step 1 of any plan is, can I sit for 30 minutes, 15 minutes, and not think about something other than this thing I'm trying to think about?
Whoa.
That's it.
Because then you can give yourself a small win instead of like always beating yourself up about it.
Exactly.
And that doesn't get you anywhere. I love that. That's
so if it seems too big, break it into, at the win is, I can take 15 minutes out of my calendar twice this week and think about, if I flash forward 5 years, what art would I be excited about? And just take my notes on it.
Yeah.
My headphones on, take my notes and do something. That's a win.
That's great. Because like right now, I don't have time to paint with the baby. But I do have time, to do that, which is great.
Yeah. And project yourself. My thing is, project yourself forward and react to the emotion. Mm-hmm. I would be most excited if I heard or saw, man, if I had an oil that was this, it was still life, but it was this way. You want to imagine the joy of feeling that so you can see it. And that actually starts to give you the frameworks.
Oh, that's so good. I love that. This is like the perfect timing for this conversation at this point in my life.
I was like, knowing that like you're 6 weeks out, I'm like, this is something I want people to hear, because the amount of time, Mariah, I talk to women who are like, I'm trying to figure out navigating. My brain does not go away.
Yeah.
I mean, I love my child. The amount of time, like, I love my child. I'm scared to say out loud, but I actually want to keep writing. I want to keep creating. I actually want us to work on my company. And I'm like, no, it's okay. You can navigate this. You really can.
Yes. It's like in your head, it's so messy, but the putting in the effort to do it is so worthwhile, because it's stereotypical to say, but that's what makes you a better mom, is when you are feeling like you're not building up this resentment towards your kids because you're looking at them and you're like, you're the reason why I don't have the time to do the things. No, actually, I'm the reason I don't have the time to do the things that I'm saying, because I'm not prioritizing it or framing it the right way.
They need to, I always say your kids need to see you fully alive, or they won't believe it's a priority for themselves, because they seek the thing they see.
Absolutely. And like, I've noticed that with Ella, our oldest, if she sees me really deep and work on something, I don't even have to say to her to like, go entertain yourself. It's like she instantly will go like grab her little knitting supplies or go grab her scrapbook, and like she goes into that state. It's like she'll mirror wherever I'm at. And so if I'm always in this like frantic, never allowing myself to have that deep work state, it's like she doesn't see that being modeled for her.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So prioritizing yourself. Thanks so much for making time, Mariah. I really appreciate that.
It was so good to see you.
So great.
Oh my
so
gosh,
good to see you.
So awesome.
Thanks for watching Maps Are Dead. If these conversations are helping you rethink your path, do us a favor. Like, follow, and leave a 5-star review. Helps other people find us and helps others find their way. And if today's episode has hit home, if the map you're following doesn't quite feel right, we've got something for you. We call it the navigation brief. Here's how it works. You send us your top 5 CliftonStrengths. We're going to send you back a custom video with real insights. Where you are, what's holding you back, and how to start moving with more clarity. No fluff, no hype, just truth, direction, and a little shot of momentum. You can sign up at the link in the show notes or in the podcast description. Thanks for being here. We'll see you in the next episode. Remember, maps are dead, so live courageously.